Untangle Your Anxiety, Chapter 4. The Symptoms of Anxiety. When we were both recovering, we found it really useful to have some of the symptoms of anxiety explained for us. The reason being that anxiety comes with an abundance of intense and confusing symptoms, which can easily lead to more worries that end up on the ever-building worry pile. When working with anxious people, we find it really helpful to apportion strange feelings and sensations to the label of anxiety, rather than focusing on each and every symptom and treating it as a worry in itself. In this section, we have listed some of the most common symptoms of anxiety as well as some of the most strange. Derealization and Depersonalization. This symptom can be really scary initially. It was the trigger for Josh's first panic attack and very common amongst anxiety sufferers. Derealization can be described as a feeling of unreality or feeling detached from either ourself or surrounding. Derealization occurs when we just don't feel right, with our senses being slightly skewed, but we can't quite describe it to others. Here are some of the descriptions of derealization that we have heard from clients over the years. I can hear myself talk, but it doesn't feel like me talking. It feels like I'm living in a dream world that isn't my reality. It feels like I can see myself in third person. I just feel really spaced out and not in the room. People's faces don't look real, as if they are made of clay. It feels like the first sign of me going crazy. Derealization and depersonalization are actually harmless, and it is not the first sign of you going crazy. It can feel uncomfortable, but when it catches us unaware, it can trigger the anxious response, and we may begin to fear it. The reason why we suddenly feel this symptom is a combination of two factors. 1. We stress breathe and slowly hyperventilate. When we are stressed or anxious, our breathing pattern changes, usually without awareness. We take in more oxygen than normal, and as a result, our blood oxygen levels increase, and with that comes its own symptoms. Stress breathing also includes breathing out less, which means less carbon dioxide leaves the body. This is called hyperventilation and can occur over several days, and not just to someone who's panicking. It can therefore easily go unnoticed. Hyperventilation means there's more oxygen in the blood, which leads to lightheadedness, dizziness, numbness, and an array of bodily changes. This is part 1 of why we feel so strange when we experience derealization. 2. Fight or flight. When we are anxious, we are in fight or flight mode. Whether we are panicking or just feeling on edge, this is still some form of fight or flight. When in fight or flight mode, the body redistributes blood to our major muscle groups in the lower part of our body. It does this to engage us to run faster, away from predators, or fight predators. Side note, Dean and Josh are big softies and wouldn't fight anyone. Importantly, as a result of this means there is less blood flow in the brain, as well as a shift in blood pressure. This also contributes to the strange feeling of derealization and detachment. The higher blood oxygen level from overbreathing combined with a temporarily reduced blood flow in the brain due to flight or fight is why we feel spaced out and derealized. Hyperventilating. So a little bit more on this. Another common symptom that occurs when anxious or experiencing panic is hyperventilating. Our breathing may become shallow and restricted as we take in quick, short breaths, which in turn causes carbon dioxide levels in the blood to decrease. This symptom, like every anxiety symptom, can often come out of nowhere and can be frightening. Unfortunately, an anxious person's natural response to this would be to breathe even quicker and shallower, which in turn will increase the anxiety further. Many people who experience this symptom often describe it as a shocking and suffocating sensation. Normally, we are not aware of the regular normal breathing. However, when panic and anxiety occur, we can become hypersensitive to our breathing and focus on the fact that we feel breathless or we cannot breathe properly. Our relationship with this thought, I cannot breathe, can increase our anxiety further, causing an anxious person to take in quicker, more shallow breaths. This reduction in carbon dioxide in the blood can cause many other physical symptoms such as tingling, chest pain, numbness, and dry mouth. Hyperventilation can develop into feeling of dizziness, lightheadedness, and feeling faint. This is due to the narrowing of the blood vessels that supply blood to the brain. It is worth noting that for some people, hyperventilating is rare. It can only occur at an occasional response to panic or fear. Hyperventilating will increase the heart rate, and you may feel like your hands or feet are cold. It can also cause feelings of nausea and sickness. So why does hyperventilating occur? When we are anxious or feeling stressed, we tend to carry a lot of tension in our body, especially our upper body. This can affect the ability of the diaphragm to function efficiently, which in turn puts more pressure onto the breathing muscles. Prolonged overuse of these muscles can lead to breathlessness, and as a response to this feeling, an anxious person may then hyperventilate. The main problem of hyperventilating, just like other scary anxious symptoms, is that the symptom often leads to further anxiety. Often people who deal with this symptom are convinced that there must be some other medical explanation and will disregard that anxiety is at play. Many people who suffer from anxiety and panic will overbreathe even when they think they are relaxed. When an anxious person is hyperventilating, they will often feel that they are not getting enough oxygen into their body, which leads us on to the next symptom, struggling to catch breath. Another common symptom of anxiety is when people complain that they cannot catch their breath. They may also feel that they can't take a full breath or a suffocating feeling of the lungs. The reason why we have put this symptom third is because it links fittingly with the derealization in the sense that this too is down to stress breathing or hyperventilation. When we take in too much air, the body very intelligently steps in to regulate the amount of oxygen in the bloodstream. It does this by preventing us from taking in more oxygen than we need. Basically, if you are often anxious and struggle to catch your breath with no related health condition, then this is because the body is telling you that you have too much oxygen. Of course, if we don't know this and we are anxious, we may begin to misinterpret this as a sign of us not being able to breathe properly. Unfortunately, we then attempt the opposite of what the body wants us to do. We begin to try and breathe in more. This is why during a panic attack, some people end up having tingling hands or feet, as well as feeling extremely lightheaded. Fear not, though, as the body always brings us back to balance whether you panic or not. Remember, panic cannot stop you from breathing. Heart palpitations and flutters. It is absolutely normal for our heart to pound and our beats per minute to increase during anxiety. This happens as a result of the adrenaline and cortisol that is released as part of the anxious response. It is also common for our heart to palpitate and flutter during periods of prolonged anxiety. This includes the occurrence of ectopic beats, where it feels like our heart is skipping a beat or doubling up on beats. If you have done a concern though, if you do have a concern though, we implore you to check it with your doctor just to make sure and you can have the appropriate tests. Digestive system problems. The symptoms of anxiety can often mimic the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome because when we are anxious, the body prioritizes the threat response over the need to digest and process food. As a result, the digestive tract slows down, which causes several symptoms associated with IBS. These include stomach bloating, acid reflux, diarrhea, constipation, heartburn, stomach cramps, and trapped wind. It takes a lot of energy for the body to engage a fight or flight response, which can cause the digestive cycle to be put temporarily on hold. This can lead to a buildup of undigested food from the stomach to the colon. which leads to all sorts of bodily changes, such as release of more stomach acid, the flushing of the digestive tract, diarrhea, or the blockage that can make us constipated. Chest pains. A scary symptom for some is the occurrence of chest pains. These can present in a few ways, usually as short, stabbing pains, a dull ache, or a tearing type of sensation across the chest area. They can be particularly scary when we are experienced alongside heart palpitations or chest flutters, as anxious people can misinterpret this as a sign of impending heart attack or an ongoing heart problem. Chest pains are one of the most common symptoms of anxiety, and they usually occur because of posture and muscle tension. When we are anxious, all of our muscles contract in order to compensate for all the adrenaline and cortisol we process as part of fight or flight or freeze. As a result of this, we often hunch forward, push our shoulders and head forward, and the chest absorbs a lot of the muscle tension. When these muscles relax, we notice that the chest feels tense and can often feel painful. Obviously, if you are concerned, go check over with the doctor just to make sure. Sweating and perspiration. Sweating is another common physical symptom of anxiety. Let's look at the reason behind why we sweat when we are feeling panic and anxiety. When our body goes into fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system releases hormones including adrenaline, which in turn activates our sweat glands. One interesting study of the brain scans revealed that sniffing someone else's panic-induced sweat, as gross as that may sound, lights up areas of the brain that handle emotional and social signals. One theory is that sweating is an evolved behavior that makes our brains alert to whatever threat or perceived threat is making us anxious. Another theory why we sweat has to do with when our ancestors would hunt in the wild and be open to attack from predators. It is believed the sweat would make it easy for us to slip away if anything caught us. Sweating has a lot of advantages. It will eventually evaporate from the skin, cooling the body temperature to prevent elevated internal temperatures. This is not specifically needed for anxiety, though, so is seen as more of an annoyance to those experiencing anxiety. As with all anxiety symptoms, nervous sweating can lead to increased sweating because we may feel self-conscious about it, especially if we are in a social situation. If sweating is a symptom of anxiety, this cycle is probably all too familiar for you. You sweat equals you may get hypersensitive to the fact that you're sweating, and the thought sticks in your mind, which equals you sweat more. Sweat doesn't occur with anxiety disorders. Sweat doesn't only occur with anxiety disorders. It can occur with everyday social situations that can make everyone nervous, such as public speaking, making a request, meeting new people, job interviews, being put into an unfamiliar situation. Excessive sweating is known to occur as a primary symptom in as many as 32% of people who have a social anxiety disorder. Problem with sleep. There is a huge correlation between lack of sleep or broken sleep and increased anxiety. Excessive worry and fear make it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep through the night. Lack of sleep can increase anxiety levels, which causes a negative cycle with each aspect fueling the other. So we know anxiety causes lack of sleep, but did you know this? A lot of research has been done on sleep deprivation, and it is thought that the lack of sleep can be caused by developing anxiety disorder. Insomnia and nightmares are listed as common symptoms in general anxiety disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. As much as 1/3 of the adult population reports difficulty sleeping. One interesting study by Melman and Yude found that compared the healthy subjects, people with panic disorders reported more complaints of middle-of-the-night insomnia and late-night insomnia through the two groups that did not differ with regard in early-night insomnia. Many people with panic disorder experience occasional sleep panic attacks. Just like anxiety, sleep problems can impact how you function emotionally, mentally, and physically. Just the old question, Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Researchers have found that the relationship between sleep problems and anxiety is bidirectional. It's important to note that treating sleep problems without taking steps to manage anxiety is unlikely to have any real lasting impact. Difficulty concentrating. Having difficulty concentrating or a feeling that your mind goes blank is a common symptom with many anxiety disorders. Anxiety can make us become hyper-focused on the thought that appears to be stuck in our mind or a physical sensation, and we suddenly become aware of and often distracts us from whatever task we are in the middle of. Anxiety can also make us focus on irrational thoughts that seem to be spiraling or jumping out from one to another. These are caused by our body becoming overly activated to the point where it starts processing all the thoughts as rapidly as possible, only to end up focusing on nothing at all. Calling it a lack of concentration is misleading, as you are concentrating. We're just focusing on the wrong things, like the anxiety you're feeling and how it makes you feel. It is very hard to focus on a task at hand when you feel that your mind is trying to make you focus on these uncomfortable thoughts, sensations, and feelings. Many people use distractions to cope with anxiety. For example, you may find yourself checking your phone more when you are in a heightened state of anxiety because you find that checking your phone relaxes you. However, by doing this, you could be distracting yourself from the task at hand, and it will make it difficult to focus. And the rest. Anxiety presents with a lot of symptoms. It is easier to understand if we split them into two categories: mental symptoms and physical symptoms. Mental symptoms of anxiety can include racing thoughts, uncontrollable overthinking, difficulty concentrating, feeling of dread, panic, or impending doom, feeling irritable, heightened alertness, problems with sleep, change in appetite, watching to flee from the situation you are in, depersonalization, derealization. Physical symptoms of anxiety can include sweating, heart palpitations / increased heart rate, hyperventilation, hot flashes, shaking, dry mouth, dizziness, nausea, and other gastrointestinal issues, eye floaters, muscle twitching, always checking with your doctor. Although anxiety is responsible for a myriad of physical symptoms, always check with your doctor if you are concerned or if the symptoms are prolonged or seem to be getting worse. It is better to be safe and also to be reassured of yourself. In conversation, Josh. Okay, Dean, I want your top 3 favorite spiciest symptoms of anxiety, and I'll give you mine. Dean. My top 3 would definitely have to be the emotional, impending doom, so the fear mentioned in the first chapter. So that sense of impending doom, something seriously is going to go wrong. Josh. Oh yeah? I hate that. It's so convincing as well, isn't it? Dean. It really is, yeah, and it almost gives you a sense of terror, doesn't it? Yeah, you're just like, oh my god. But for me, what I added to the terror was that my rational brain knew there wasn't really anything wrong, so then I'd worry about why I was worrying. I'd start panicking about why I felt so scared, because then I just thought, well, there must be something wrong with my brain. If doom is there, then there must be something happening, and only after a while it's like, it's a trick, it's false alarm of the brain. Dean. And I think it's worth nothing that if we didn't have that trick, the false alarm, the anxiety wouldn't be doing what its role is, which is to convince you that there is a threat and there is a danger, so that impending doom is exactly what's needed in an anxious response. Josh. Yeah, looking out for predators and all that. Okay, that's number 1. What's your other 2? Dean. Number 2, it definitely has to be heart palpitations or increased heart rate. I can go back to wearing a Fitbit. I used to do some running, believe it or not. Haha. You won't believe it at the moment. Josh. There's no mystery behind the wonderful physique of yours. Dean. So yeah, I used to do some running, and one thing being anxious and having a Fitbit on is that it's telling you your current heart rate, which was a blessing and also a curse, because when you're in an anxious moment, I remember being sat in the office at work looking at my Fitbit, And as I looked at it, seeing my heart increase and looking down and then thinking, why is it increasing? Is sat all I'm doing is sat here at my computer. When the more I thought about it, the more it increased, the more other physical symptoms would start to occur. Josh: oh yeah? And your third? Dean: my third one would be... Josh: you don't need to describe it, just what it was and that you just didn't like about it. Dean: oh, probably sweating, And I think it's one that's not discussed a lot. Obviously being in the office, having to wear shirts and be presentable, and then obviously knowing that I'm anxious and sweating, it can make it uncomfortable situation you're in, because then you focus on, do you know what I mean? What happens if people think, why am I just sitting sweating my clothes off? Josh: brilliant. My worst one for me was derealization. The sense of detachment used to freak me out. I thought that was the first sign of my brain breaking or something. The other one was just chest pain. Dean: yeah? Josh: when when you have chest pain and palpitations, your anxious brain just goes to one place, doesn't it? Dean: yes. Josh: oh my god, there's something wrong with my heart. And the last one that really took me a long time to overcome was struggling to catch my breath. I always thought, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I can't catch my breath. Obviously, now I know it's because we breathe too much throughout the day. But yes. Dean: Josh: and they were my three spiciest ones. But obviously there's loads of them. I must have experienced over 30 symptoms of anxiety. Dean: just going back to the chest pain, how would you explain that? Was it like a sharp pain for you, or was it like a crushing pain? Josh: multiple, crushing, stretching, stabbing pains. There are different types of pain, because the muscles are constantly contracting and expanding. And because their chest muscles are so big, well, mine are anyway, because I'm really hench.